Following up from the last week's episode about possession, we are going to read 3 more stories under the same theme this week, but with a stronger focus on exorcism. The idea of possession is terrifying in itself, but the terror has been largely compounded by the scenes of exorcism either from fictional films or allegedly true ones floating around the internet. Typically characterized by the supposed possessed, glaring with wild eyes and spitting obscene words with growling glottal voice. It is definitely trauma-inducing. But for me, personally, what I find most fascinating is how a ritual of exorcism clearly shows the spiritual worldview of the given culture. In the Christian world, for example, it is often assumed that it is the work of an evil or demon when someone is thought to be possessed, and the exorcism becomes a battle of good, represented by the Christian God, and the evil, represented by satanic power. In the worldview of Korean shamanism, on the other hand, there is no such clear distinction between good and evil. The world is full of gods and spirits in that worldview, and none of them are inherently good or bad. It is only when certain obsession, desire, or resentment overwhelms them that they turn harmful to the living. For that reason, shamanic exorcism is not about crushing or vanishing the spirit with a greater power of the all-righteous God, but a process of persuading it to accept its reality and move on to the heaven by various tactics of coax and threat. I can't say today's stories are necessarily representative of such shamanic worldview of Korean tradition. I realize my explanations in the intros are not always supported by the stories that follow, but I do think they all give an interesting insight to the spiritual worldview of Korean culture, as well as spookily entertaining, of course. So, here are 3 allegedly true stories from Korea about possession and exorcism. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. I met these group of friends in early 2000s from online game community. We all lived in the same region, and figuring out we were all into paranormals, we soon got together to explore all the known haunted spots up and down the country. Fortunately, or unfortunately, we never really experienced anything truly scary or abnormal other than occasional chills, and I think it was all because one of our gang was a grandson of a big shaman. Let's call him Sanghwa. He inherited a spiritual sensitivity that runs in the family, and his grandma had been putting spells and talismans to protect her grandson from passing ghosts and spirits. Not sure if we were all for the usual ghost repellent such as sea salt and atsugi beans, which Sangha would always bring when on exploration, or for all the protective spells his grandma put on him, but ghosts in all the infamous haunted spots wouldn't dare to approach or do funny tricks on us, or at least so Sanghwa explained. Adventures without a real spooky experience lost the luster, and the paranormal explore phase soon passed. Now, in 2010, I happened to drive past an old abandoned apartment. It suddenly revived the old passion for haunted spots in me, and I summoned the old friends for another adventure. Meanwhile, they all got full-time jobs, or some of them even got married with children, so it took a couple of months just to set the date. But one Friday in July, 5 of us got together. Apart from Sanghwa, we were all ordinary guys with little to no spiritual power or knowledge. For the occasion of the big reunion, we even got a room in nearby inn. When it hit 6 or 7 in the evening, we finally got to the old apartment. It was indeed very spooky there, spookier than any other famous haunted spots I'd been to with a gang. Even before we got into the building, one of the gang, Seokhyun, already started complaining that he got chills and sense of foreboding. Seokhyun was the sportiest and biggest of us, and the hardcore skeptic. The reason we used to include him in our exploration was in case we had to run into some shady people in the abandoned places. For that reason, him showing such a fear now was indeed unusual. Regardless, we started our adventure, but not long after, Sanghwa got a call from his shaman grandma.
"Where are you now? I got a bad feeling. Quit it, whatever you were doing. Just quit it,"
said she. "Hi, Grandma. I'm just hanging out with old friends. Don't worry." Sanghwa tried to calm her down. In all those visits to spooky places, it was the first time his grandma called him. In fact, I've never heard that she said anything to Sanghwa back in the days when we were around all those spooky spots. It must mean that the place we were entering was no joke. But for 5 young guys got together, it still wasn't enough to change their minds. And we carried on across overgrown weeds and into the building. As we looked around the ground floor, Sanghwa said that there was a spirit and he would try to talk to him. He offered a glass of soju and cigarette and chatted the spirit up. "We are not here to any way disturb you or drive you away, but just to look around, so if you do please, do tell us your story." Apparently, as a reply, Sanghwa told us the ghost told him that we'd better leave now, that the ghost in the upper floor was very aggressive, that he himself was staying down there because he was afraid of that ghost. One warning after another, but it still wasn't enough. We pushed on and reached what used to be the kindergarten for the residents. It was unproportionately large for the size of the apartment, with a large playground to it. We must have spent quite some time there when Seokhyun, who first showed a strange reaction earlier, started to shiver all over and mumbled something unintelligible. We all tried to shake and calm him down, but only short time after, another of the gang, Min-seok, also started complaining he too was feeling odd. Facing 2 big burly men suddenly shivering and retching, we finally decided to quit it there. But before we could get out, Seokhyun screamed and ran into the darkness of the deep inside the building. So one friend decided to take Min-seok out first, while I and Sanghwa followed Seokhyun inside the kindergarten. Usually poised and know-it-all, Sanghwa himself seemed frightened. He said that we'd got to fetch Seokhyun quickly and get out of there right away, that we should never have come there. His unrest only grew as we went up to the first floor searching for Seokhyun. "We have to get him right away. Something terrible may happen otherwise," he said. And we found Seokhyun in one corner on the 2nd floor. He was standing the spot of moonlight through the broken window, and clearly wasn't himself, swaying slowly side to side, mumbling in the voice that wasn't his. "How dare you come here to play around? None of you shall escape from here." Sanghwa threw atsuki beans, salt, and chicken blood to break him from the trance, but we too could not make him move an inch. He just kept creepily giggling and glaring at us. To make the matters worse, Seokhyun picked up a piece of broken glass and started stabbing and scratching himself. Now totally desperate, we knocked him down with a 2x4 lying around and dragged him off the building. Now even Sanghwa wasn't looking well either, shivering and half out of mind. We barely managed to drag and push everybody in the car when my phone rang. It was Sanghwa's shaman grandma.
"Where is Sanghwa? Put him on right now."
Hello, ma'am. He's all right, just away to toilet," I said.
"Cut that and put him on right now. I sense something's not right."
In the end, I confessed what's been going on. Grandma then instructed me to check on the talisman Sang-hwa always carried with him, which I could find in his wallet. And its color was off. Half of it was blackened as if scorched in the heat. In my report, Grandma said that the damage wasn't the worst that could have been, and that she would come to us right away. Back in our room at the inn, guys were still not themselves. Seokhyun was especially in a serious state, still endlessly mumbling on with focusless eyes. Sang-hwa's grandma soon arrived. She must have started as soon as finished the call. She said Sang-hwa was protected by the talisman and would recover soon, but Seokhyun was a different story. She said he'd been half possessed. It must have been a particularly strong and evil spirit, having been able to do so much damage already in such a short time. It would surely lure Seokhyun back to the place and have him kill himself. I called Seokhyun's family to explain the situation, while Grandma called in other shamans. Grandma said she was going to take Seokhyun to a temple so that he could recover a bit. In his current state, a cleansing ritual would be too much. After an excruciatingly nerves week, we were summoned to the temple. We were told Seokhyun had been trying to run away every night, but with the help of Grandma and other shamans, he'd recovered enough for the ritual. We were reluctant to go back to that scary place, but Grandma yelled we should do whatever necessary to save a friend. Seokhyun might look okay for now, but his spirit was already hooked up by the evil spirit, and how were we going to deal with the guilt if he'd do something terrible to himself in the future? So we first went back to the village where the abandoned apartment was. With the help of a local shaman, Grandma first met an elderly villager to inquire about the backstory of the abandoned building. Apparently the building was on the major travel route, with lots of traffic and thriving commercial activities. But with the opening of another motorway, the whole area declined and people left, leaving the empty building to rot. The plot of the kindergarten was where an old holy tree used to stand. Back in the days, villagers used to regularly offer ritual to the holy tree, but with the time and change of demographic, the younger villagers insisted to cut the tree down for a larger scale development. Reluctant old villagers sought an advice from a local shaman, and apparently she assured them that the god had left the old tree to get away from the hustle and bustle of increasing traffic. In the end, the tree was cut, and on the spot was built the kindergarten for the apartment block. Problems started to occur 10 years later. Various accidents and misfortunes plagued mainly the younger villagers. Miscarriages, or some mysteriously disappearing into the mountain in the middle of the night and found lost there. The older villagers felt uneasy and sought the local shaman again to demand an explanation if it had nothing to do with the cutting down of the holy tree. But not long after, the shaman was found dead, apparently having hung herself. Misfortunes for the villagers seemed to cease as the area declined and the young people left. And yet, strangely, some hikers who came to the mountain nearby would be found dead in the empty building, seemingly having committed suicide. The villagers blocked the way and put on the sign not to trespass, but such incident would continue. Grandma commented that the local shaman must have been mad or possessed. A holy relic should be treated properly with rituals and offerings if it should ever be moved for some reason. Cutting it down so carelessly for nothing more than a commercial interest was bound to lead to troubles. Now that the guardian god had been vanished casually by the people, the evil spirit must have taken its place. We then moved to the kindergarten and tried to contact a spirit there, with a fellow shaman playing the medium.
What are you? What kind of spirit is disturbing the life of a living?
Grandma asked, and the spirit replied through the mouth of the fellow shaman.
Who am I? I am the god of this place. Those delinquents thought here was their playground, so I'm simply punishing them.
I and my friend could only roll our eyes nervously, having never really seen anything like this. Grandma sternly yelled,
You call yourself a god, eh? A god shall be just and demand justice. Stop playing with a young man's life.
The possessed shaman laughed out creepily and carried on talking while dancing a strange dance.
I finally own this place after hundreds of years of waiting. Why would I ever let it go? Look around. Oh, the other spirits are afraid of me and serving me. I collected them all. They are all mine. This ground and those spirits.
Grandma later explained the god of the holy tree was the guardian spirit of the village and had been suppressing the evil spirit. With the god gone, now the evil spirit was tainting the whole area with its hundreds-years-old resentment. Already grown so strong by enslaving other poor souls, the evil had got too strong to vanish as was. The only hope was getting a help from the original god, who was the just owner of the place. Grandma asked the old villager if there wasn't any other spot where people prayed or offered rituals to. The area once having been a battleground during the Korean War, there was a memorial monument where people still offered memorial rituals. Grandma led the way to the monument and soon seemed sensing something. She said the god was still present, though much weaker, and retreated away in the mountain. She soon started a ritual to the god with some offerings. Once again, her fellow shaman seemed to contact the god and spoke.
I've been all but forgotten for many years, and I thank you for seeking me once again.
Since you left, an evil spirit has taken over this place and harms the living. Pray, good old God, could you help us to vanish it?
Grandma pleaded.
I've been the guardian of this place and been suppressing the evil. But now, having lost the holy tree where I used to reside, I have lost much of my power. But I could not dismiss your plea, and will see what I could do.
Night fell, and the ritual began. Soon the evil contacted one of the shamans and spoke through her in deep robotic tone.
Why are you keep bothering me? I said I'm the god of this place. All these spirits are serving me. I lure the shaman bitch to kill herself and drove the young people away too. Now I am the ruler, and I'll do whatever I like. Leave me alone.
Suddenly the other shaman yelled, in the voice of the god I heard earlier.
How dare you playing a god? In the land where people have been praying for the justice and good fortune for hundreds of years. You don't deserve to be a god of this place. Stop harming people and move away.
Grandma chimed in.
You know what kind of end awaits for a lost spirit like you who harms the living? You'll regret when the time comes. You have to face it. Now go away.
But the evil spirit didn't budge.
I'm already a god and the owner of this place. What will you do about it?
Grandma said,
If you are truly a god now, prove your power and let this poor young man regain himself. It'll be a piece of cake for a powerful god like you, wouldn't it? Ha! I'll leave him alone then. But if anybody should bother me again doing funny rituals and whatnot, I'll kill you all,
the evil said.
All right, I'll let you be in return, so let the young man free,
Grandma said. And with that, the ritual ended. Grandma later explained, had she further tried to banish the evil completely, it could very well revenge on Seokhyun, who was already halfway in its grip. She could not but prioritize the life of Seokhyun. The village elder promised to fence up around the place and resume offering rituals to the guardian god. And someday, when he regains power, he might be able to suppress the evil once again. Seokhyun suffered hallucinations and spoke unintended gibberish for about a month more, but with further cleansing rituals and protective spells, he finally regained his usual self. But the trauma of the whole ordeal could he not easily forget. It goes without saying that was the end of our paranormal adventures. I'd also advise against such explorations. It was just all fun and game for me and my gang too for a long time, until it finally bites us hard. Beware, I say. Back in 2004, I ran an online paranormal community. It was pretty popular and successful, its membership exceeding 30,000. In summers, we usually organized a members' event, visiting a supposed haunted spots. That year too, we received various suggestions for the exploration. Among the usual big names like Nilbomgalbi or Yeongdeok-hyunga was a lesser-known village, which was said to be nearly deserted, including its shops and local school. Sounded pretty interesting. Soon we organized an overnight event there, and to make it more exciting, we also recruited a half a dozen professionals, shamans, self-claimed exorcists, and so on. For preparation, I first visited the village by myself. Indeed, at least 8 or so houses were deserted, most of them for quite some time already. But the local school seemed to have been in use until recently and was in a good enough condition to spend the night. On the way out, I ran into a local resident, the first person I saw for the whole time I researched around. Understandably, he didn't welcome the plan of a bunch of people visiting his village for a spooky exploration. He also vehemently denied any of the deserted houses being haunted. It was just one of many sad cases of such old farming villages, young people living for a better life in bigger towns. But after offering him a cigarette and chatting him up for quite some time, he said,
"By the way, see that house over there? I would not visit there if I were you."
He still said it wasn't anything about ghosts or whatnot, but former inhabitants of the house met a sad ending in any case. According to him, while the husband constantly away to work, the wife took care of her 2 young sons alone. One day, the younger of the 2 drowned to death in the local river, and distraught and guilty-ridden mother killed her older son and herself by drinking herbicide. Well, I thought, that makes the house a perfect place to explore then. So on the day of exploration, we settled down in the empty school first. We were naturally interested in what the professional shamans and exorcists who accompanied us should say. Would they see some ghosts in the school building itself? There indeed were, they said. But each of them said something different. One said she saw 5, while others said it was an old man, while yet another said it was in the toilet. In the end, they argued among themselves, calling each other a quack. I started to wonder if these people would be more a trouble than a help for the event. Then I heard a participant, a guy who introduced himself as just an ordinary businessman, quietly saying, "Nothing's there." I asked, "What do you mean?" "There's no ghosts here," he said. I can't explain why, but I found him more trustworthy than all the other so-called professionals. So I discreetly invited him to look around the village with the rest of the professionals. As again, they could not agree on anything. One saying there was one staring us right then, others saying every house was haunted, and so on and so on. I just quietly waited what the mystery guy should say. His eyes stopped at the very house that the villager had warned about. He said to me in low voice, "There's one in that house." I didn't pass on what the villager said to anybody, and I was all goosebumps now. "What about other houses?" I asked.
"Well, there are some spirits of animals here and there, but nothing major. With half-opened eyes, one could think that there are indeed a lot of ghosts around," he said. I was now convinced this guy was a real thing. At night, we finally went to explore the abandoned house in question. The participants teamed up by 3, and each team was tasked to explore the house and find and bring out the sign we set in the wall cabinet in one of the rooms. To make it more exciting, I hid myself in the cabinet to spook them out by grabbing their hands as they reach out for the sign. The program went without any incident, with all the usual screams and fuss. But as we were wrapping up and getting out of the room with the last team, I felt a strange chill running down my spine. I think I saw something crouching down in the shadow, but I just tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. Back in the school, the night reached the usual high point of pork belly barbecue and drinks. At about 3 in the morning, and while most people were going strong with the drinks and chit-chats, I found a participant, a male university student, crouching down alone at the corner and mumbling something unintelligible to himself. His friends asked what he was doing, but he didn't respond other than carrying on mumbling into the air. One of the exorcists claimed he was possessed. He took out some beads and bells and drew a circle around the student with a salt. Suddenly, the student yelled out, "Where's my son? Give me back my boy!" The exorcist tried to talk to him, but he only carried on shouting, "You took him away! Where is he? Give my son back!" Then the mystery guy from the earlier stepped in as quietly as usual. He grabbed the possessed student by his head while pressing down his back with his left hand. "Leave him alone. Go out when I tell you," he said. The student then started begging now in a voice that resembled a woman. "Give me back my son! Give him back, then I'll go!" "Your son is long dead and has already moved on. Let your regret go and move on yourself," the guy said. The student then flipped. "Nah! I'm not going! I'm not moving! I'll rather kill him!" The guy glared at the student sternly and pressed his back even tighter.
possessed student screamed painfully. The guy seemed to be getting too tired and asked me to grab and press the student's head and back a while. When he returned, he was carrying various kind of ritualistic knife and flail. He chanted what sounded like Buddhistic spell and slashed and cut the air around the possessed with a ritual knife, while the student screaming and wailing as if getting really slashed by the move. Then the guy yelled his ultimatum.
Get out now, or I will crush your soul to bits!
Then the student sang a mournful ditty, lamenting the unfortunate fate, before he passed out. When he got around again, he said it felt like he had a dream. He could sense and recognize everything, but could not control himself, and felt all the unfamiliar sorrow and anger of the ghost as if they were his own. By now the whole atmosphere of the event had gone awry. Some were panicking while others claiming it was all but a cheap, phony show. As soon as the dawn broke, everybody quietly left without even saying goodbyes. I kept contact with the mystery guy a while afterwards. He couldn't help but sing what he saw, but didn't want to live a life as a shaman or a monk. He tried to live like an ordinary person, but would still occasionally pull to such an occasion to reveal his power unwittingly. I have a friend who sees ghosts. We've been friends from when we were little, and our close gang of friends all know his unusual ability. This is a story from when we were reckless teenagers. The ghost-seeing body would occasionally drop a word of warning when one of us made a plan to trip or go to holiday, saying something like,
"Better not. Probably not very good,"
etc. Problem was, he wasn't correct all the time. After all, he wasn't a fortune teller, but simply was stating his hunch. So, when one of the gang bragged his big family holiday plan with another friend's family, we didn't take it too seriously that the ghost-seeing body responded with,
"Doesn't feel so good. Must you go? Something might go wrong there."
When we met again a few weeks later, the friend came safely back from the holiday, and we teased the ghost-seeing body that his power should be waning. We had a good time in town, making stops at karaoke and snack bars, etc., except the friend who had a holiday started to complain more and more about headache. Painkiller didn't seem to help much either. He said it was no big deal, but we could see his face turning yellow. Then suddenly he screamed and fell on his butt. We were confused, none more so than the ghost-seeing body himself.
"What's wrong?"
he asked. The other friend replied,
"Didn't you see a young girl running crazy-like into me?"
I and other guys were still confused. Girl? What girl? But the ghost-seeing body's eyes got twice as bigger and said,
"Hey, you see a ghost now too?"
The other friend now seemed confused too.
"What? I don't see ghosts. There's a girl running over there."
"Are you nuts? That girl is a ghost."
We were all silent a while, trying to grasp the situation. Then the ghost-seeing body pursued him.
"How come can you see a ghost all of a sudden? What happened during the holiday?"
The other friend started recounting the odd instant he had, still keeping frowning from the stinging headache. One late night on the holiday, he and his friend took a walk around. They ran into a woman on the way, and she talked up to them if they wanted a deal with her. She was sort of pretty and looked benign, so they let the conversation run. They asked what she was selling, to which she just mumbled that she'd got something nice. They tried to give it a pass, claiming they had no cash on them, but she hung on, saying she could go with a barter trade too. His friend took the bait and carried on talking with her while he was just standing behind. Out of blue, the woman noticed the wristwatch he was wearing and enthusiastically said that would do for the best she'd got. Despite him turning it down, for the watch was from his late grandfather, she kept insisting. Somewhat intrigued, he undid his watch and showed it to the woman, to which she reacted as if he struck a match under her nose. Regardless, the woman kept saying,
"Yeah, that. I'll exchange with that,"
with a shivering voice. My friend noticed something was clearly off with her and tried to put the watch back on, but it slipped and fell on the ground. The woman snatched it up, pushed him away, and ran away, saying,
"It's a deal."
He followed her into the darkness, but she disappeared without a trace. Since then, he'd get occasional headache, but he just considered it an unfortunate incident.
"You've made a deal with a ghost, apparently,"
said the ghost-seeing body. He explained that the lingering link and energy from grandfather that was associated with the watch had been protecting him. That's why the woman, the ghost, was afraid and yet desired the watch. Ghosts exist in a different dimension than the living people and usually cannot exchange something with a living person, except when they manage to make a direct one-to-one deal. But this friend had no idea what he'd got in exchange for the grandpa's watch. Without any explanation, ghost-seeing body held his head and looked right into his eyes.
What are you doing?"
The other friend protested, but with no words, he just looked hard in his eyes. Not long after, he was dripping with sweat. Then the other friend said in a strange voice,
"Can you see me?"
"Leave him. He's not yours. Interfering with a living person would only do you harm,"
said the ghost-seeing body.
"Deal is a deal."
Then the friend complained about headache, and ghost-seeing body, drenched in sweat, declared,
"We need a shaman."
It was the first time that we saw the ghost-seeing body calling for a professional shaman. But now he seemed to have spent all his energy, and one of us had to support him. So carrying both the ghost-seeing body and the possessed friend, we started to look for a shaman nearby somewhere. The first place we came across was rejected by the ghost-seeing body. He then started to direct us to a very rundown place. Even before we entered the place, the shaman came out and reprimanded the ghost-seeing body.
"You know you are not supposed to come here." "I know, but my friend needs your help. I'll stay out here."
And the ghost-seeing friend did go out of the room despite our protest. The shaman then got to her work, basically sitting right in front of the possessed friend and looked into his eyes like mad. The friend's demeanor also changed and looked right back at the shaman.
"You end up in the hell should you keep interfering with living people,"
said the shaman.
"The deal is done. What will you do about it? It's over.
Shaman sighed and took something out from the cabinet and told us,
"Do you want to save your friend? Hold on to him fast like your lives are dependent on it."
We were shaking, but had no other option but do as we were told. Shaman then started to throw some sort of beans. Later I realized they were Atsuki beans at the possessed friend, which ensued violent reaction from him trying to break free. After the beans, Shaman took out some talismans and started chanting some spell, walking around us.
Shut up! You can't kick me out! I'll kill you!
The shaman stopped and looked hard at him again. She was sweating. She wrote a couple of talismans and gave it to me and the other friend who was holding down the possessed one.
Keep it well. It's to protect you. Burn after it's done, said she.
After another lengthy chanting walking around us, she sat down to pause and said,
He's too weak now, with no guardian power of his grandfather. He needs support from his family. Call them in.
Surprise, surprise, the ghost-seeing body had already called the family in the meantime. The parents of the possessed friend had already once helped by the ghost-seeing body regarding their business, and they trusted him enough to show up. The shaman told them to sit around their son and carried on chanting. The lengthy process ended with burning the talismans. The shaman recommended that the family should seek further help from the temple they attended, as they were a Buddhist family. The possessed friend claimed that he could not remember whatever happened between the moment he started speaking in a strange voice and when he got out of the shaman's room. Thankfully, he became all fine afterwards. But there's one last epilogue to this incident, that the grandfather's watch turned up. He apparently just found it left on the street. It must be the very watch, he said, with exactly the same scratches and dents as he remembered. The deal was broken after all, I guess. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. It's Christmas again. I wished I could make an episode with a bit more Christmassy theme, but I could not find enough stories that could even remotely linked to the holiday, unfortunately. Christmas is a holiday in Korea too, but honestly, it's treated as a day to party and have fun among friends and lovers, and certainly lacks the cultural significance as in the Christian world. So I just hope this slightly longer than usual episode could have made it up to your festive expectation instead. If you enjoyed my work, please consider leaving me a comment and a like, and subscribe to my channel to follow up with more interesting stories in the future. I'll give myself a week off for Christmas and New Year and come back on the first Sunday of 2022. Wherever you are, whatever you do, I wish you a warm and peaceful Christmas and a very happy New Year. See you next year.